Welcome to episode 77 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by a 17-laws guy. It's January 16, 1994. We're in Tokyo at the National Stadium. And today's one of those dates where a league doesn't just crown a champion, it announces that a country has decided football can be a major industry, a major culture, and a major ambition. Verdy Kawasaki are about to become the first champions of the professional J.League. Not the first champions in Japan, because Japan has had league champions before this, but the first champions of the fully professional, made-for-TV, globally marketed version of Japanese football. So today we'll do three things. We'll go back before 1993 to the long, uneven build of Japanese football, schools, company teams, Olympic miracles, and a semi-pro league built in the shadow of Tokyo 1964. We'll explain why the J-League arrives when it does, and why it arrives the way it does: stars, sponsors, spectacle, and a 100-year ambition. And then we'll drop into the match itself, on this day, January 16 in 1994, when Verdy and Kashima finish a two-leg final that feels like Japan testing what professional football could sound like. We start with a moment. The scoreboard on January 16, 1994 says 1-1. Kashima score first, Verdy equalize late from the penalty spot, and that's enough, because 1 week earlier, in the first leg, Verdy went to the same stadium and won 2-0. So on aggregate, Verdy take the title. This is the first J-League championship, and it ends not with fireworks, but with a controlled finish, an equalizer, a trophy lift, and a country watching itself become a football nation in real time. But you can't understand the J-League without understanding what Japanese football was before it decided to professionalize. Because Japan's football story is not a straight line, it's a series of accelerations. The Japan Football Association is founded in 1921, prompted, remarkably, by England's FA presenting Japan with a silver trophy in 1919, essentially nudging the country toward organized association football. That same year, Japan starts a national cup competition, what becomes the Emperor's Cup, still the country's flagship knockout tournament. Japan joins FIFA in 1929. Then history hits: World War II, disruption, and re-entry. The JFA rejoins FIFA in 1950. And in between, you get one of Japan's foundational football myths, Berlin 1936. Japan beat Sweden 3-2 at the Olympics, the miracle of Berlin, a result that still reads like an upset from a different universe. We'll surely talk about that in another episode of OTD. So yes, there's deep football in Japan long before the J-League, but it's football as clubs, universities, schools, and institutions, not football as mass professional entertainment. Now jump forward to the post-war era and the real ignition point. Tokyo hosts the Olympics in 1964. Japan's organization performance there matters, not because it wins medals, but because it legitimizes football domestically. It signals this sport can belong here. And then, in 1965, Japan launches the Japan Soccer League, the JSL, a corporate league, semi-amateur in status, but increasingly serious in structure. It's the moment Japan turns football into a national weekly rhythm. And then comes Mexico City, 1968. Japan win Olympic bronze. Kunishige Kamamoto becomes the tournament's top scorer. This is a key point. Japan's rise is built through the amateur Olympic pipeline and helped by imported expertise. Detmar Kramer, the German coach and technical educator, becomes central to Japan's coaching development and is remembered as a foundational figure in modern Japanese football. So by the early 1970s, Japan has the pieces: a league structure, an Olympic proof point, coaching methodology, and a sense that football could be upgraded. But it still isn't professional football, not yet at least. Now enter a bridge figure, Yasuhiko Okudera. In 1977, he joins 1. FC Köln in the German Bundesliga. He becomes the first Japanese player to play top-flight football in Europe, and the symbolism is perfect. Köln win both the Cup and Bundesliga titles that season, and on a decisive day, which we most certainly will do an OTD episode on late in April, Okudera even scores his famous diving header goal in the 5-0 win in Hamburg over St. Pauli, and which seals the double. This matters for the J-League because it creates a new idea inside Japanese football. Japanese players don't have to be domestic only. Japan can export talent, and Japan can import prestige. And in Köln, Okudera overlaps with a young Pierre Littbarski, who later become one of the headline European names to come to Japan and play in the early J-League. So the pathway becomes circular. Japan sends a player to Europe, Europe sends a star back. That is exactly the vibe of the early 1990s. Because the J-League doesn't arrive quietly, It arrives like a product launch. Founded in 1991 and prepared through 92, it kicks off in May 93 with 10 clubs, the original 10. And the league makes two decisions that tell you everything about its mindset. First, it sells spectacle. It uses big venues, choreography, and ceremony. The opening match, Verdy versus Yokohama Marinos, draws a national stadium crowd that looks like Japan announcing, "We're doing this properly now." And second, it refuses draws. In the inaugural format, matches go to golden goal extra time and penalties if needed. The league wants decisive outcomes, drama, and television-friendly closure. And then come the names. Zico is in Japan, not at the end of a career as a mascot, but as a central figure at Kashima Antlers, shaping a club identity, and he is one of many Brazilians at the onset of the J.League. Gary Lineker arrives at Nagoya Grampus 8, the most famous English striker of his generation, landing in Japan in a move that feels like a parallel universe. And, as mentioned, Littbarski arrives at Jeff United, a World Cup winner, a European icon, certainly playing league football in Chiba. And then there's a detail that ties directly back to episode 71 last week. The league's top scorer in that inaugural season is Ramón Díaz. Yes, the same Ramón Díaz who scored the late winning goal for Argentina against West Germany at the Mundialito in 1981. Japan didn't just create a league. Japan imported narrative gravity. I mentioned J-League's 100-year ambition. It's not a slogan. Rather, it's a blueprint, a vision. Community-based clubs, more grass, and sports facilities in everyday towns, and a structure where a club isn't just the first team, but a local sports hub that gets people of all ages to watch, play, and participate. In the long-range version of that plan, the ambition is explicit. Grow Japan into a true football nation, with around 100 professional clubs by the league's 100th season in 2092, and even the stated dream of winning a World Cup during those 100 years. Now back to this match on this day in 1994 and to the title. The final is a two-legged playoff between the winners of the two sponsored stages. Similar to the Apertura and Clausura split we recognize in many Latin American leagues today. Kashima win the first stage, Verdy win the second. The first leg between the two on January 9, 1994 in Tokyo's National Stadium, and with over 53,000 in the stands, ends 2-0 to Verdy. Miura scores, Bismarck scores, and Verdy take control of the leg. So when the second leg arrives on this day, January 16, the tension is clear. Kashima have to chase, Verdy have to manage, and the match behaves like a proper final. Tight, physical, slightly nervous. We're back at the National Stadium, and now there are almost 60,000 spectators. Kashima strike first, Alcindo scores, and suddenly the tie has oxygen. But Verdy had the league's first real domestic superstar face, Kazu Miura, King Kazu. And late in the match, Verdy get their moment, a penalty. Miura converts, 1-1, 3-1 on aggregate, Verdy are champions. And the image is unforgettable because it sits at the intersection of two Japans. The corporate, semi-amateur football Japan that built the base, and the new professional, globally ambitious Japan that wants to be part of the football world's main conversation. Now zoom out, because the J-League is not about 93 and 94. It's about what happens after the boom. The league's early years are famous for the J-League fever, packed stadiums, imported stars, and national fascination. Then comes the correction. The novelty fades, clubs and finances get tested, and Japanese football has to prove it isn't just a launch event. And the proof arrives in waves. Development. Japan becomes a serious producer of technically refined players, many of whom now treat Europe not as an exception, but as a stage in their normal career path. Infrastructure. Clubs become local institutions, not just corporate departments. And international status. Japanese clubs become consistent players in Asian competition. Japan remains near the top of the AFC's league rankings in the modern coefficient era. And domestically, the league is still drawing serious crowds. In 2024 alone, the total J-League attendance passes 11 million. And even structurally, the league keeps evolving, with major calendar reforms planned to align more closely with the European season, aiming to strengthen transfer timing, competitiveness, and global linkage. So the J-League today is not a novelty. It's a mature football ecosystem, and one that's increasingly confident about exporting and importing at the same time. Which brings us back to why January 16, 1994 matters. Because this is the day the idea becomes real, the day the first professional champion is crowned, the day Japanese football stops being a regional story, becomes a global project. So what should we take away? As always, 3 points. First, Japan's football rise is built on institutions, a national association, a Central Cup, Olympic proof points, and a corporate league that quietly built a competitive base long before professionalism arrived. Second, the J.League succeeds because it was designed, not improvised. It's a league built with intent, spectacle, decisiveness, star power, and a long strategic horizon. And third, the first champion matters because it anchors legitimacy. Verdy's title is not just a trophy, it's the opening chapter of a professional era that changes player pathways, club identities, and their country's football future. On this day in 1994, Verdy Kawasaki became the first J.League champions, and Japan's modern football age began in earnest, and with the ambition to win the World Cup. That's all for episode 77 of OTD, the first J.League champion, Verdy, Kashima, and Japan's pro football Big Bang. If you have memories of early J.League fever, the stars, the kits, the penalty shootouts, the sense that something new had arrived, email me at otd@17lawsky.com. Ideas are always welcome. And you can help us by rating this show 5 stars, clicking the subscribe button, and forwarding this show to a friend. And thank you for doing that. Tomorrow, January 17, the 200th Manchester Derby will be played, and we mark this milestone in English football and use it as a lens to tell the story of how one city produced 2 global brands and one endless argument. You don't want to miss it.